expected points, clean sheet odds, and who is the best captain. This video has got all of the information you need to know ahead of game week 11. Alright, so we're going to start off the video then by reeling through the top players by position for expected points. I've got a view of just game week 11 in isolation and then the next 5 game weeks. I think it's also, it's useful to know who the best players are for next week, but also who are the best players for slightly longer term. And I would suggest if you're looking to make a transfer, you want to be looking sort of 3 to 5 game weeks in advance, maybe more, right? So I think that's an important way to look at things. So goalkeepers for game week 11 in isolation then. We've got Edison, number 1, Kelleher, Flecken, Onana, Vicario, David Raya, and Sam Johnston. Now, one keeper that doesn't appear on this list that has been doing exceptionally well for his owners recently is Sells of Nottingham Forest. His fixtures do turn coming up as well. We'll just look at the next 5 game weeks as well, who's not on there as well. His game weeks do turn over the next five. He's got, I believe, Newcastle next, then Arsenal away, and then Man City away, kind of mixed in the next 5 fixtures. So I think the clean sheet odds for Nottingham Forest aren't great for that run. And he's also, this is just my opinion, he's also not a goalkeeper that makes a boatload of saves. And I think the best goalkeepers in FPL, I say this all the time, but the best goalkeepers in FPL are ones that keep like an average amount of clean sheets, say 9 to 12 per season, and then just get consistent saves bonus. That seems to be how you get the top scoring goalkeepers in fantasy football. I look at who was the top scoring keeper in the game last season. It certainly wasn't Edison. It was Pickford. A guy that kept, I think, 10, 13, something like that, clean sheets, but he got consistent saves bonus. And that's kind of the marker for me of the best goalkeepers in the game in FPL. Anyway, so for the next 5 game weeks, we've got Raya and Edison as the leading 2. Jordan Pickford is up there. Emiliano Martinez, Flecken, Onana, and Travers. One goalkeeper I wanted to talk about is the goalkeeper that's in my team at the moment, and that's Flecken. He's amongst the top goalkeepers for expected points in game week 11. He ranks 3rd. Hasn't played yet, to be fair, at the time of recording this video in game week 10. And he's ranked, 5th there of all goalkeepers for the next 5. And of like the 4.5 and below goalkeepers, he's the number 1. But the one thing I'd say about Flecken is going back to that average amount of clean sheets, consistent saves points I made before, he's not keeping the clean sheet. So whatever happens against Fulham, even if he keeps a clean sheet in that game, he's gone through 9 Premier League game weeks so far, some of which with good fixtures, without keeping a clean sheet. So regardless of the outcome against Fulham, I'd consider him, for me at least, and maybe for you as well, to be on the chopping block. All right, next up, we've got the defenders. And what I've chucked in here as well, so I've got a view of 1 game week, 5 game weeks. And then also, I wanted to look at the best cheap defenders, because naturally, when you're looking at the top projected points, you're probably going to be looking at the premium assets at each position. And that tells half the story, because you can't just fill your team totally with premium assets, right? You need to pick some of those cheaper players as well. So I'll show you a view of that in a later segment. So for game week 11 in isolation, Guardiola is top, followed by Trent Alexander-Arnold. You've got Aït-Nouri there against Southampton in 3rd. Pedro Porro, Ake, Udogie, and Dalot. Pleased to say that Aït-Nouri avoided getting his 5th yellow card against Crystal Palace in game week 10. So he's going to be playing. And yeah, that Southampton at home fixture is looking pretty good. I'd also say Porro, he hasn't necessarily put up the level of attacking returns that we saw from him last season, but he still looks to be playing that kind of similar attacking role that he was last year. Just in case he hasn't really got amongst the returns yet. I think Ipswich at home is a great fixture for him. Nathan Ake, he's in this list. I think ultimately the Fantasy Football Hub algorithm is trying to predict what the Man City starting 11 is going to be. They've got Ake playing at the moment. It could well be Rico Lewis that starts. It's a little bit, difficult to define who's going to play for Man City at the moment. I think Guardiola's probably the most nailed defender right now, which is why he's the top for expected points. And you also see Dalot of Man United squeezing in the bottom there. They've got Leicester City at home, which is obviously a good fixture. And I think Man United potentially, especially once their new manager comes in, could potentially be back on the menu. So yeah, those are the top defenders for the next week. For the next 5 game weeks, Gabriel is the number 1 defender. Combined Arsenal's fixtures, well, the combination of Arsenal's fixtures kind of taking a turn for the better. So they actually have fixtures once they get, I think it's, yeah, Chelsea, is that? Yeah, I think that says Chelsea. Once they get that game out of the way, I think things will improve for them. From a clean sheet perspective, and also Gabriel just offers so much goal threat, and that's why he's by far and away above the other Arsenal defenders. So I obviously think he could be a good option. Guardiola's up there as well, you know, just insanely attacking, scored 3 goals already this season. Plays for Man City, who, you know, they're not actually keeping that many clean sheets, but they've got some decent fixtures coming up. You'd expect some clean sheets from that lot. Trent is just obviously the most attacking defender in the Premier League. White and Timber up there as well. Seem to be starting regularly for Arsenal. Got Aït-Nouri in the mix. Is obviously one of those budget defenders that's creeping in. And Saliba as well. And then finally, I just wanted to look at the best cheap defenders for the next 5 game weeks, right? We've got Aït-Nouri. We already know that he's number 1. He appeared in the top defenders overall list. De Ligt, who has offered quite a bit of goal threat for Man United. But at 5 million, I think you could probably do better for cheaper. Luca Dean and Matty Cash both seem to be the starting fullbacks for Villa, who, once they get the game in Game Week 11 out of the way against Liverpool, they could be decent options. You know, both look pretty good from an attacking perspective. And Villa on their day, they've proven they can keep clean sheets against top teams, right? But that's a little bit few and far between, I would say. One player I really did want to talk about, though. God, I know. I can already see the comments coming in. But it's Reece James. 4.9 million. I believe he's played 3 Premier League games in a row now without getting injured. I would probably want him to play 2 or 3 more just to get that further security that he's not going to have that reoccurring hamstring injury again. Although I don't think there's anything that would give me 100% security over him. But the Chelsea fixtures do turn from sort of game week 12 onwards. They've got a really, really nice run until, well, sort of the new year. So he could potentially be back on the menu. I wanted to include him as a little segment here because, yeah, 4.9 million is a really good price if he's starting regularly at right back for Chelsea. Although probably I would say, like, over that congested Christmas period, which isn't actually that far away, he's probably just going to play 1 game a week. I think that's what Maresca said actually in a press conference, is that he's not going to be rushed into things and he's probably only fit really to play 1 game a week. You've got Collins there of Brentford. Again, similar to sort of the Flecken argument, he's been pretty good from an attacking perspective, put up a lot of expected goals so far this season, but Brentford just haven't kept a clean sheet yet. And then Leif Davis of Ipswich, scored in Game Week 10, is one of the leading defenders in the league for expected goal involvements, so he could be a good option as well. But again, not necessarily keeping the clean sheets. On the other side of the coin, a few players that aren't on this list, I'd say the likes of Murillo, Milenkovic and Aina of Nottingham Forest. Those guys, I think, are decent options, but like I said when talking about sales, their fixtures turn. They've got Newcastle, Arsenal and Man City away in the next 5 fixtures, which is obviously really tough. And I would probably hedge against them keeping clean sheets. And whilst Aina did score, I don't know how to pronounce it, whilst he did score in Game Week 10, he's not a player that's ridiculously attacking and you can bank on getting attacking returns every week. So that's why he's not really appearing on this list. I would always consider Forest defenders, but if I would buy them ahead of playing Newcastle, Man City and Arsenal, that's probably why they're not on this list. All right then, on to the midfield. In Game Week 11 alone, Salah is top, 8 expected points, followed by Son, 7.4 expected points. I think, and we'll get on to captaincy in a second, but I think there's a genuine argument that Heung-min Son could be the best captain for Game Week 11. I think he's got the best fixture, but there's just a little bit of doubt around his minutes and fitness. He got subbed off in, I believe it was the 59th minute in the game against Villa in Game Week 10. I believe Tottenham play in Europe as well on Thursday. So, you know, question marks as to how many minutes he's going to get in that game. I would imagine he gets completely rested, to be honest, and is back for the Premier League fixture against Ipswich. That would be my guess, but we need to wait until the week plays out. I'd suggest if you're thinking about bringing in Son, I would wait until that European fixture is out of the way and we get a bit more info. Ange said in his post-match press conference that he was subbed off at that point just for preservation, basically. It was nothing to worry about. He was always planned to be subbed early. So I'm not too concerned at the moment about Son, but I think I would hesitate on bringing him in until, yeah, that European game gets out of the way. But I would say, you know, Salah's put up the better numbers this season. That's undeniable. But Son has the better fixture, just if you're thinking about captaincy. Saka's got Chelsea away. He's amongst the top players as well. Got Brennan Johnson and Mbeumo. Bruno Fernandes and Phil Foden rounding off the list. And then for the next 5 game weeks, Salah is top, 37.1 expected points over the next 5, followed by Saka, who is actually slightly ahead of Cole Palmer. I think that's basically down to the fixture in Game Week 11 and the strength of the Arsenal defence, or at least the data set that exists for the strength of the Arsenal defence. It's not that they've necessarily been strong over the last sort of 4 or 5 game weeks, but they have been over the last couple of seasons, and that's always factored into these expected points as well. Son is up there, in Mbumo, Foden, and Brennan Johnson as well. Well, there's no surprises there, really, I don't think. These are just kind of, in my mind, who are the top midfielders. And then similar to what I did with the defence, I'm looking at cheap midfielders here. So I filtered 7 million and below, and these are the top midfielders for expected points under 7 million. So we've got Brennan Johnson at the top, Semenyo, Garnacho, Kulusevski, Bernardo Silva, Madueke, and Lewis Potter of Brentford. These are the top midfielders, according to Fantasy Football Hub, for expected points over the next 5. All right, on to the forwards then, and it's no surprise that Erling Haaland is the top forward. He's always going to be the top forward. The argument isn't, is Erling Haaland the best forward? Well, actually, it might well be, because he's not been doing too well recently. But, you know, the argument is he worth the cash more than is he the best forward in the game? Chris Wood is in second place. Newcastle at home is his fixture. I said that's probably a negative for the Forest defence, because Newcastle seem pretty capable of scoring goals. But I wouldn't be too worried about Chris Wood facing Newcastle. I think he could do well in that one. Solanke against Ipswich. Obviously, a brace against Villa in Game Week 10 when a lot of people had given up on him. Ipswich is obviously a really good fixture, so he's amongst the top. Cunha has got Southampton at home. It's obviously a really good fixture. Should have got more than just an assist as well in Game Week 10. Isak back with a goal against Arsenal. 8.3 million. You know, if he puts up anywhere near the level of numbers he did last season, he's worth that price point. Wissa, really good cheap forward. Got Bournemouth at home. And then Watkins with Liverpool away. For the next 5 game weeks, Haaland, Isak, Watkins, Wood, Solanke, Cunha, Wissa are your top. I'm not going to go through all these guys in detail, mainly because quite a lot of the lists, at least for, you know, all price points, are around the same, because there are limited forward options, I would say, in the game at the moment, purely because most teams play with 1 forward. So realistically, you know, the pool of forwards to pick from is smaller than the pool of midfielders and defenders, because there's just less of them in the league. But the interesting point, I think, is the cheap forwards. I think, you know, I'm stating the obvious basically when I talk through who are the best premium forwards, because there are just so few in the game. But cheap forwards, I think, is where it gets a little bit interesting, because I think most people will have 2, maybe 3 of these guys in their team at the moment. And looking at the expected points might be a decider for you. Maybe if you're looking to sell Erling Haaland, for example, or you're just looking to get one of these into your team anyway. Looking at these kind of expected points totals might help you. So Chris Wood is the #1 cheap forward for the next 5 game weeks for expected points, according to Drafthound. Even with Arsenal and Man City away mixed in those next 5 fixtures, he's still back to do well. And to be honest, you know, would you be surprised to see Chris Wood score away at Man City or Arsenal? I probably wouldn't. The numbers he's put up this season and last season are insane. I think it's something like 22 goals in 30 games now over the last 2 seasons. And I always go back to this when I talk about Chris Wood. If a premium forward was putting up 22 goals in 30 games, you'd consider him a good option. And Chris Wood is doing that at 6.5 million. So yeah, I think he's a really good option. Cunha, I agree, he's probably, I think it's between Cunha and Raul Jimenez for me as to who is the second best cheap forward in the game. Cunha's got the fixtures, but I think Raul Jimenez, his underlying data is just a little bit better. And I just think he's a little bit better of a player or an asset at the moment. And he's basically $1 million cheaper as well. So that'd be my view. But the order goes Cunha, Wissa, Raul Jimenez. Beyond that, I probably wouldn't touch Calvert-Lewin, Vardy or Evan Nilsson. Vardy just keeps popping up with the odd return here and there. But I personally can't back him for the long term. That's just my opinion, though. If you've got him in your team, you probably should keep him, to be fair. And then Calvert-Lewin, I mean, been an absolute disappointment. Still got decent fixtures coming up. So, you know, it's a hard case based on those fixtures at least to sell him. But I think when you've got the likes of Raul Jimenez in form, Wissa, Cunha and Chris Wood all looking good and playing well, I think it could be time to sell Calvert-Lewin for one of those guys, if you ask me. And finally, I just wanted to look at captaincy, or certainly finally from the expected points data anyway. I wanted to look at the captaincy. So I've got one source of expected points data here in Fantasy Football Hub. You've gone through all the players yourselves, just as I've taken you through the video, basically. But Fantasy Football Hub has Salah as the top player for expected points, followed by Erling Haaland. Now, I've got a little captaincy matrix here as well. So These, I would say, are your 5 captaincy options for this game week. We just showed the Fantasy Football Hub expected points. I'll show the FPL review expected points in a second. But that's one source for expected points. Now I think you need to analyse the fixtures as well. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So Haaland has got Brighton, who traditionally play quite a high line under their new manager. Lewis Dunk is injured, and it does look like Kevin De Bruyne could be back fit for this game. I would make an argument from my perspective that Haaland is probably the best captain, in my mind, for game week 11. Salah obviously is a good option as well, don't get me wrong. Likewise, Son against Ipswich. I would probably rule out Palmer against Arsenal. I wouldn't rule out him getting returns, but I'd probably be hesitant to captain him in that game. And likewise, Saka against Chelsea. I just have a feeling that Arsenal-Chelsea is going to be a relatively low-scoring game. Just my opinion, though. So the 3 captaincy options for me are probably Haaland, Salah and Son. And I'd say just with Son's injury doubts, limited minutes that he got in game week 10, that would put me off a little bit. And the fact he's just, I don't know, he's just not quite been at the level of seasons gone by so far. It might just be the fact he's been hindered by injury. So I bear that in mind. So for me, it's probably between Haaland and Salah if you were to ask my opinion on who is the captain. And I would probably suggest, fixtures-wise, the fact that Kevin De Bruyne is likely to be back, I'd probably give it to Haaland based on the fixtures. I've stuck the FPL review expected points in here as well, because I know a lot of people love FPL review and sometimes use it as gospel, probably too much, but I do like FPL review as well. And it agrees with me in terms of the captaincy. So it has Haaland, Salah, and then Son as the order. But the expected minutes for Son are up at 87, so that's expecting him to play most of the game. So yeah, that's what FPL review has to say in terms of captaincy. It's got Foden up there as well. I probably wouldn't agree with that myself. I think there's a lot of data behind him from seasons gone by that's gone into that. I just haven't seen him playing at that level this season. And interestingly, Jarrod Bowen's up there as well. I haven't mentioned him in any of the data that I went through in terms of expected points from FF Hub so far, but he's up there for FPL review. And finally, just to round things off, looking at things from a defensive perspective, I've got the clean sheet odds according to Drafthound. And it's quite an interesting one this week because there are a lot of teams that have really good clean sheet odds for a change. It's very rare that you see a majority of teams with 30% or above clean sheet odds, but it certainly looks that way this week. So Man City sit on 59%, Tottenham on 44%, Man United on 42%, Arsenal on 42%, Newcastle on 38%, Liverpool on 38%, Bournemouth on 36%, Fulham on 36%, West Ham on 33%, Palace on 31%, Wolves on 31% as well. And even Forest, there's so many teams, you know, in and around 30% or above to keep clean sheets. So suggests to me this could be one of the lowest scoring game weeks in terms of goals, predicted wise anyway. And you know, if you're looking at making bench decisions or decisions on who to bring in, decisions on who to start, etc. for your defenders and goalkeepers, hopefully these clean sheet odds help you. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating. I'd really appreciate as well if you could subscribe. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subs by the next international break. I'm slowly getting there. And if there's anything you could do to help me out, I'd really appreciate it. By the way, I hope you like the new edition of the best cheap players. I didn't include goalkeepers because you could already see top cheap goalkeepers amongst the list. But I think looking at defenders, midfielders and forwards, you could be missing some of these best like cheap gems by just focusing on the best point scorers because, you know, there are premium assets in each of those positions. They kind of, you know, the cheaper options get overlooked and you need to build your team of cheap and premium players, right? So hopefully you enjoyed that and found it useful. I think that's everything. Once again, just ask you, there should be a button there on your screen. I'm pointing at it right now if you want to subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.